On a scorching morning in 1182, a 21-year-old boy was strapped onto his war horse because his rotting fingers could no longer grip the reins. This was King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, the leper king, a man whose body was decomposing while he was still alive. Facing him was a nightmare that would make the bravest soul tremble. 30,000 of Islam's finest warriors, led by the legendary Saladin, stretching across the horizon like a plague of locusts. Baldwin had just 750 knights. The math was a suicide note, 40 to 1. Yet, by the time the sun set on that blood-soaked day, the impossible had become reality. 2,000 Muslim warriors lay dead in the dust, while the tiny Crusader force stood unbroken, defying every law of military logic known to man. But history books often miss the terrifying truth hidden beneath this miracle. How did a dying boy outsmart the greatest general of the medieval world? What was the secret formation, whispered in terrified tones as the Iron Hedgehog, that turned a handful of infantry into an unbreakable wall of death? And most hauntingly, why did this glorious victory actually sign the death warrant for the Kingdom of Jerusalem? The answer lies not in divine intervention, but in a brutal, cold-blooded calculation that traded blood for time and tactical genius for strategic ruin. Get ready to witness a battle that should never have happened, fought by a king who should have been dead, against an empire that should have been unstoppable. We are about to peel back the layers of myth to reveal the gritty, gory reality of medieval warfare, where survival depended on a formation so precise, one step out of line meant instant annihilation. But first, we must understand the spark that ignited this inferno, a spark struck by greed and madness in the desert heat. The year 1180 had brought a fragile, exhausted peace to the Holy Land, a truce bought with blood and weariness. Baldwin IV, despite his flesh literally falling from his bones, ruled with a mind as sharp as a razor. Facing him was Saladin, the Kurdish sultan who had done the impossible, united Egypt and Syria into a suffocating embrace around the Crusader states. But peace is boring for men who live by the sword. Enter Reynald de Chatillon, the mad wolf of Kerak, a man whose greed was only matched by his stupidity. From his fortress perched like a vulture over the trade routes, he saw Saladin's caravans not as protected travelers, but as walking bags of gold. In late 1181, Reynald shattered the truce. He attacked a massive caravan, slaughtering guards and seizing 200,000 dinars in loot, but he made a mistake that would cost thousands of lives. Saladin's own sister was in that caravan. When Saladin demanded restitution, Reynald laughed and spat. Let your Muhammad come and save them. That insult was the match that burned the world. Saladin didn't just get angry, he declared jihad. He summoned every warrior from the Nile to the Euphrates. By May 1182, 30,000 men stood ready in Damascus, a tidal wave of steel poised to wash the Christians into the sea. Baldwin faced a catastrophic choice. His kingdom was a string of isolated castles, strong individually but weak if divided. He could hide behind his walls and watch his kingdom burn, or he could do the unthinkable. He ordered the garrisons stripped. Every able-bodied man, every horse, every spear was pulled from the safety of the castles to form a single, desperate field army. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. If they lost this one battle, there would be no one left to defend the gates. Saladin's army was a terrifying masterpiece of logistics and power. 12,000 mounted archers, Turks and Kurds born in the saddle, formed the vanguard. Behind them rode 8,000 heavy cavalry and 10,000 infantry. The dust cloud they kicked up could be seen from 20 miles away. They carried enough arrows to blot out the sun, literally 30,000 arrows per minute at peak volley. Against this ocean, Baldwin's force looked pathetic. 750 knights and 4,000 infantry. But these weren't conscripts. They were veterans who knew that defeat meant death. Baldwin, his hands wrapped in silk to hide the sores, led them to Belvoir Castle, a limestone fortress commanding the Jordan Valley. He knew Saladin couldn't bypass it without exposing his supply lines. But Saladin was smart. He didn't attack the castle. He attacked the economy. He sent raiders to burn the villages in the valley below. From the walls, the Crusaders watched their kingdom turn to ash. 60 villages destroyed, harvests burned. It was a cruel lesson. I can destroy you without even fighting you. Saladin hoped to provoke Baldwin into a reckless charge, to draw the Frankish madmen out of their formation and slaughter them in the open. But he underestimated the Leper King. Instead of charging blindly, Baldwin drilled his men in a revolutionary formation, the Ficus Auricius, or the Iron Hedgehog. It was a combined arms box formation where infantry and cavalry moved as one organism. As dawn broke over the limestone walls, the Crusaders marched out, not to charge, but to invite the attack. They were walking into the lion's den, and they brought a trap of their own. The sight that greeted Saladin's scouts was bizarre. The Crusaders weren't in a line, they were a moving fortress. The infantry formed a hollow square, bristling with 14-foot pikes. Between, the pikemen stood crossbowmen, their weapons cocked and loaded. Inside this protective shell rode the knights, safe from the harassment of the horse archers. The Turkish archers swooped in, unleashing a storm of arrows. 12,000 shafts hissed through the air, but the Crusaders' shield wall snapped shut like a turtle shell. The arrows, fired from long range to avoid the crossbows, bounced harmlessly off the heavy wooden shields. Then came the hammer. 500 Mamluk heavy cavalry, the elite of the elite, slammed into the Crusader line at full gallop. The sound was like a thunderclap steel meeting wood and flesh. But the line didn't break. It bent. The pike wall absorbed the shock, and then, from point-blank range, the crossbows sang. At 50 yards, a crossbow bolt punches through chainmail like it is paper. In 30 seconds, 80 Mamluks were dead. The survivors wheeled away in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. Inside the formation, Baldwin collapsed. The pain of his disease overwhelmed him, and he fell from his horse. His bodyguards caught him, but the king refused to be taken to the rear. From a litter, gasping for air, he continued to give orders. "Hold," he whispered. "Let them come to us." He knew that patience was their only weapon. If they broke formation to chase the enemy, they were dead. Frustrated, the Turkish commanders ordered their signature move, the feigned retreat. 500 cavalry charged, then suddenly turned and fled, screaming in mock panic. It was the oldest trick in the book, designed to trigger the predator instinct in the knights. "Chase us! Kill us!" they seemed to say. In almost every other battle, hot-headed knights would have taken the bait, breaking ranks to pursue, only to be surrounded and butchered. But today, the discipline was supernatural. Not a single horse moved. The Crusaders stood like statues of iron, watching the enemy flee, their silence more terrifying than any war cry. Saladin, watching from a hill, felt a chill run down his spine. The Iron Hedgehog wasn't just defending, it was advancing. Step by synchronized step, the formation rolled forward. The rhythmic crash of 5,000 armored boots hitting the earth sounded like a doom drum. Saladin realized he was losing the initiative. He had to break them now, or his reputation would be shattered. "Full assault," he commanded. "Everything we have." 8,000 horsemen thundered forward. The ground trembled so violently that dust rose 100 feet into the air. It was a tsunami of muscle and steel aiming to drown the Christian island. As they crashed into the pikes, the formation flexed. Sections of the line swung inward, creating funnels of death. The Muslim cavalry found themselves trapped in kill zones, assailed by crossbow bolts from 3 sides. It was a slaughterhouse. The carnage was absolute. In 20 minutes, 400 Muslim cavalrymen were cut down, bodies piled up against the pike wall, creating a grisly rampart. But Saladin wasn't done. He ordered his mounted archers to circle the formation, firing at maximum rate. 30,000 arrows a minute rained down. The sky turned black. A knight later wrote, "The arrows fell like hail. You couldn't see the sun." Men prayed aloud, thinking the last judgment had come. Yet, the hedgehog kept moving. The Crusader infantry used pavis shields, massive wooden barriers usually reserved for sieges, to create mobile shelters. They marched through the arrow storm, leaving a trail of blood but never stopping. And then the Crusaders played their ace. At a trumpet signal, the pike wall opened, like a gate to hell unlatching. The knights poured out. This was the countercharge Saladin feared. The knights smashed into the disorganized Muslim infantry who had been pressed against the pikes. It was kinetic energy, weaponized. The heavy war horses trampled men into paste. The lances skewered them in rows. The knights carved a bloody arc through the enemy and then, just as quickly, retreated back inside the safety of the pike wall before the Muslim cavalry could react. It was a masterclass in combined arms warfare, 300 years ahead of its time. From his command post, Saladin did the math. He had lost 2,000 of his best men. His enemy had lost barely 180. His troops, who had conquered from the Nile to the Tigris, were demoralized, broken against a wall they couldn't crack. To continue was to invite disaster. "Signal the withdrawal," he ordered. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The invincible sultan had been beaten by a dying boy and a porcupine of pikes. The Muslim army retreated, disciplined but defeated. As their horns sounded the withdrawal, the Crusaders stood amidst the carnage, too exhausted to cheer. Baldwin ordered them to hold position. No pursuit. He knew his men were at their limit. The battlefield was a carpet of death. 2,000 Muslim bodies lay baking in the sun. The victory was total. Miraculous, impossible. But as the adrenaline faded, the reality set in. They had won the battle, but the smoke rising from the valley told a different story. 60 villages burned, the harvest destroyed. The tax base for the entire year was gone. Saladin had lost men, which he could replace. Baldwin had lost the economic engine of his kingdom, which he could not. The Battle of Belvoir Castle stands as a tactical masterpiece, a moment when discipline and innovation defied the laws of numbers. The Iron Hedgehog proved that infantry, when properly trained and combined with cavalry, could withstand anything. But the victory was a hollow one. The economic damage Saladin inflicted was a wound that would not heal. He had discovered the kingdom's Achilles heel. It didn't matter if the Crusaders won every battle, if they starved to death. 5 years later, at the Horns of Hattin, Saladin would apply the lessons he learned at Belvoir. He wouldn't attack the formation head-on. He would starve it, thirst it, and exhaust it. The victory at Belvoir, ironically, taught Saladin exactly how to destroy the kingdom of Jerusalem forever. Baldwin IV died in 1185, his body finally consumed by the disease he had fought for so long. He went to his grave undefeated in battle, a tragic hero who held back the tide with rotting hands. His story is a reminder that sometimes brilliance and courage are enough to win the day, but not enough to save the future. If you were blown away by the tactical genius of the Leper King and want to uncover more lost battles of history, smash that subscribe button. We bring the past to life, blood, guts, and all. What do you think? Was Baldwin's decision to strip the castles genius or madness? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, remember, victory often comes with a price tag you can't afford to pay.